Death at Gallows Green. Chapter 9. In all good fairy tales, the princess is transformed by a fairy godmother, or a hidden identity is brought to light, or a magical animal brings wealth and happiness. It was thus for the shy young woman of Bolton Gardens, who was transformed by the magical animals she loved and brought to life, and for the children who will forever after treasure her work. Sarah Tisdale, The Magic of Imagination. It was raining the next afternoon, at the hour that Kate had agreed to walk with Bee. A little while before the appointed time, she went in search, expecting to find her room on the third floor where the visitors' servants were put up, or in the garret, where Bee's ward was no doubt confined. But Kate was surprised when the maid of whom she inquired told her that the room was on the second floor, near the head of the stairs. When she knocked and was bade to enter, and did, she was surprised again. Not only was the room on the wrong floor, it was far too handsomely furnished and decorated to be that of a servant. It was hung with rose damask draperies, and contained a four-posted bed, carved mahogany furniture, and a blazing fire in the fireplace. And there was no madwoman mumbling insanities in the corner. Instead, stretched out on the hearthrug in a drowsy repose, lay the white rabbit Kate had apprehended yesterday. "Hello," Bee said, looking up from the sketch pad in her lap, on which she was working in pencil. On the table in front of her sat a small creature, quiet and complacent enough, but with a prickly coat as rough bristled as a scrub brush, and a black snout almost like that of a small pig. "I should have come to find you in a moment or two," she added. "It is much too wet to walk out, don't you think?" "Yes, it is," Kate said. "I would rather enjoy the rainy afternoon by looking out the window." And as she came forward, a brown mouse with large black eyes peeped out from beneath Bee's skirt. "Excuse me," Kate said urgently, and backed up a step. "There's a mouse under your skirt." "Oh dear!" But instead of jumping onto the chair or shrieking, as Kate might have expected, Bee pulled her skirt aside and looked down. "Hunka munka," she scolded. "Get back in your house. Can't you see we have a visitor?" With the mouse still sat blinking beadily at her, she scooped it up, rose, and popped it into a small wire cage on the window sill. "You shall have a bit of cheese if you are polite," she said, "but if you persist in making a nuisance of yourself, you shall be put to bed without any tea." Kate was so astonished that she could only stare. "Do you often talk to mice?" she managed finally. "It depends on whether I have anything to say. I more often talk to hedgehogs." Bee went to the table and picked up the prickly creature, which snuggled into her hand. Kate stepped forward. "What a funny creature," she said, extending a finger. "What is its name?" "Mrs. Tiggywinkle." Kate couldn't help smiling. So this was the mad woman in the garret. "She's just like a fat, sleepy little dog." Bee nodded. "As a model, she's very comical. So long as she can go to sleep on my knee, she's delighted. But if she's propped up on end for half an hour, she begins to yawn pathetically and then likes to bite." Mrs. Tiggywinkle chose that instant to yawn, showing sharply pointed yellow teeth. "You're very brave to make a pet of a creature with such sharp teeth," Kate said. She glanced down at Bee's sketch pad on the table. There were several drawings of the hedgehog. In one she was wearing a large apron over the striped petticoat and a ruffled mop cap, and her forelegs were soapy to the elbow. "I see you've dressed her up," she added, admiring the skill and humour with which the cunning little animal had been drawn. "How clever, and what a remarkable lifelike figure." "Thank you," Bee said. "She's a washerwoman, you see. All my animals have one profession or another." She pulled out another sketch, this one of a frog dressed in mackintosh and galoshes with a fishing rod and a basket. "The children like my stories better when I write about what the animals do, fishing or ironing clothes, and show them doing it." "You're a writer?" Kate exclaimed happily as Beryl Bardwell recognized a kindred spirit. "As well as an artist." "No," Bee said sadly. "I'm afraid I'm neither. I have begged to be allowed to submit a story or two for publication, but unhappily for me, my father is actively opposed, and my mother agrees to everything he says. I only managed to sell a watercolor for a calendar and a few humorous Christmas cards, and I've illustrated some terrible doggerel that a German firm printed on cards of 4 pence halfpenny." She sighed. "When Papa discovered what I was doing, he set up such a horrid fuss." that I now only put my pictures in letters. I write for the little Moors, you see. They are the children of my father governess. They like my stories." Kate looked back at the drawings. "But you're so enormously talented. How can you let your parents deny you the opportunity to develop your art?" She didn't add, "And on top of that, you're a grown woman and ought to be doing as you like." But she thought it. Bee gave a melancholy shrug. "How am I to do otherwise? I'm entirely dependent on their financial support. I'm expected to live with them in Bolton Gardens until I'm married." She smoothed Miss Tewinkle's furry ears. "And that becomes less likely each year. They discourage friendships, you see, with men and with women." She twinkled, and the corners of her mouth turned upwards. "Not that I mind so dreadfully being a spinster. I've not yet met a man I wanted to marry, and I'm perfectly content to live singly. But it is difficult, since I'm allowed away from Bolton Gardens only in my parents' company." Now Kate understood why Bee had spoken so triumphantly about her solitary railway journey. "I wonder that they permitted you to come here alone," she said. "That's because the Hyde Parkers are cousins, and we are frequent visitors here." Bee opened a large wicker hamper with its own little food and water dishes and set Mrs. Tiggywinkle aside. "Mamma and Papa planned to make the trip, but Mamma fell ill with a cold, and I begged to be allowed to come alone. Not that I like Melford all that much," she added, pouring a handful of hemp seeds into the hedgehog's dish. "It's grand and imposing, but rather boring, except for the squirrels in the park. Still, it's a chance to be on my own, and I intend to make the best of it. I have brought my sketching materials and Papa's second-best camera, and when the rain stops, I shall go out and see what I can find." "So you're a photographer, then?" Kate asked, thinking of Sir Charles, whose other passion, besides mushrooms and bats, was photography. "Yeah," Bee said. "I enjoy it, but I must confess that I took it up as a means of getting away from Mamma when we were on holiday." Her plain face was transformed by a brilliant smile. She detested driving through the bracken in a pony cart, stopping in the cold wind to photograph a growth of pizziza or a gigantic cortinarius. She laughed a little. "Poor Mamma wearies me so at times, but I do pity her. I could not live confined as she does." "I see," Kate said, suddenly struck by the marked contrast between this shy young woman and gay, exuberant Eleanor. But in a way that seemed startlingly clear to Kate's American eyes, these two British young women were very similar. Eleanor married as her parents expected, Bee stayed home. Both did as they were bid, both were docile enough on the surface, yet both exercised whatever subtle means they could find to resist coercion, to establish their own separateness, their independence. For Eleanor, it was her husband's fortune that gave her a measure of freedom. For Bee, it was her eccentric love of animals and the art that it inspired. Kate looked up. An idea was forming in her mind, a most wicked idea. "Do you never travel anywhere except to Melford in the company of your parents?" "Only occasionally with my brother Bertram, and last year to my cousin Caroline at Harriscombe Grange." Her smile was pensive. "After visiting Caroline, I have become dreadfully anxious for more travel. I do love the countrysides and gardens full of flowers and cottages and walking by the water." "Then perhaps," Kate said, "you would like to come to Bishop's Keep for a few days. It's near Dedham, in Essex, about 40 miles from here. There are gardens and cottages and miles of countryside, and a lake and a river, the River Stour, and an estuary where the Stour flows into the sea. And it's all very beautiful now that spring is here. The house is large, and you and your friends," she looked at Peter on the hearth and Hunker Munker in her cage, "your many friends could be quite comfortable." Bee's blue eyes were round. "But I am expected to remain here for at least a week. The Hyde Parkers would not object, certainly, but whatever should I tell Papa and Mamma?" "Do you have to tell them everything, at least right away? If you are wanted, the Hyde Parkers could telegraph to Dedham, and you could receive the message straight away, and when you returned home you could as easily take the train from Colchester. Your parents would be none the wiser." There was a moment of silence. Bee's face was wistful, then thoughtful, and at last determined. "I think," she said in a small but steady voice, "that is a splendid idea." Wonderful, Kate exclaimed. We shall leave on Monday morning by carriage and be home in time for tea. She was halfway to the door before she thought of something and turned. How funny, she said. I didn't even think to ask your whole name. She laughed a little. Or perhaps it is a secret. Perhaps I could simply call you B, and not ever know who you really are. Oh, no, it's no secret. I forgot, that's all, B laughed. Mamma would be scandalized at my manners. She sat down at the table and took up her sketch pad again. My name is Beatrix, she said. Beatrix Potter.